This podcast is brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Rebecca Harris, president and head distiller of Catoctin Creek Distillery, recently shared, "Service after the sale is what really separates the quality of a supplier relationship. G&D Chillers has always been a phone call away when we needed them. For a small business like mine, that partnership makes all the difference. Whether you distill batch by batch or in a continuous operation, for more than 30 years, G&D has had the proven solution. Visit them today at gndchillers.com. And for over 11 years, ABS Commercial has been your full-service equipment manufacturer, designing quality distillation equipment ranging from 50 liters to 5,000 liters. Whether establishing a new distillery or expanding into a brew distillery, their team of experienced engineers and designers work with you to develop customized distilling solutions. With their consultative approach, they tailor to your production capacity, space constraints, and budgetary considerations to help you create quality crafted spirits. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized distilling needs. Welcome to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. I'm your host, Molly Troop, and today with me is Adam Spiegel. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just enjoying a sunny day. One of maybe the last. We'll see. Well, let's dive in. I would love for our listeners to learn a little bit about you and how you got started in the spirits industry.
Yeah, totally. So I've been doing this professionally for about 14 years, unprofessionally about 16. I started as a small craft distiller here in Northern California. I always say that we were the 15th distillery in the state. Now there's 280.
Wow.
And then within the first couple hundred in the United States, and as we all know, there's at one point was almost 2,800 to 3,000. And we started off just very sort of myopically focused on making whiskey, and just kind of kept our heads down. And use a direct fire pot stills and made things from grain to glass for so long, and that was really fun. I mean, it taught me a lot about the industry and the history, and kind of what it is that I might be able to do to sort of add to that history. And we just sort of stayed focused on trying to master that beautiful thing we all love called whiskey. And then over the last 3 to 4 years, my business model has adjusted from being single brand focused to focusing on other people's brands in addition to my own. So I am the master distiller of Corning and Company today, where we have about 40 plus clients, and we do a whole plethora of things, whether it be contract production or packaging or warehousing, logistics and compliance and route to market and marketing and all that sort of stuff. So we have built a little, what I'd like to think is more like a craft incubator out here, where in Northern California and servicing pretty much anything on the whole West Coast, we can provide people with a really nice solution for, hey, you have an idea, let's help you bring that idea to life. Hey, you have a brand that needs to scale, let's help you scale that brand. Hey, you've been working on a brand for a really long time. You want to step away. Now what could be next for that brand? So we're sort of answering those 3 questions, and it's been interesting in this sort of environment to do that.
Yeah, I guess let's just dive into this. Is your Corning and Company company, and I mean, you obviously saw a need for this kind of work. What was it that really drew you to this? Where was this need? Where were you really seeing this need come from?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was just our own needs. So as we were scaling our production facilities and looking at the next bottling line to pick up, do you buy a bottling line that's oversized and it kind of sits there in the corner for a while, and you have to hire a staff who runs it, off and on, maybe a third of the year or half the year, depending on how fast you can go and how much throughput you need for your own brands. And then we began to start looking over and being like, hey, if we had more bandwidth, who could we service? if we take out more warehouse space, who could we offer just-in-time inventory for warehousing? We were already starting to do a little bit of contract work on the distillation side, servicing some brands that you're probably familiar with. And so then as a result of those things, we said that, hey, why don't we go and begin to start looking at what the craft, the craft distillers need. And if Cordy and Company, I think, existed when I first started my business, going back to the kind of original point, would I have built my business the exact same way? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I found myself, just like I'm sure every other craft distiller, being like, hey, I've got X number of square feet today. I'm full. I've got tanks and I've got totes and I've got pallets and dry goods, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I need more. So how much more do I take out? Do I take out another 2,000 square feet and there's 6,000 square feet? And then when you finally do that, are you going to be full from day one? Are you going to be half full? So you're basically paying double the cost for the bigger space. And so what I think is I started realizing, and myself and my business partner, Sam, and I began to talk about this, and really, I think he and I are sort of the yin and yang of this facility. I'm really been the dreamer and the artisan and the creative one, and he's really the business-minded, finance and experience driven one. But as we talk about this what we can offer, it's how can we help somebody not have to make the wrong decisions, especially in this environment when money is really tight and sales are depressed, and we're all kind of trying to figure out what the next move is for us, good or bad. I think a lot of the distillers we talk to, it's like, listen, pay us a de minimis amount of cost to store your pallets or your barrels or your contract production or even your bottling. Let us tackle those things and let you focus on the things that you're really good at that help drive sales. Mm-hmm. So are you good at sales? Are you good at marketing? Are you good at working with distributors? Whatever your secret sauce is, do that and let us sort of focus on all the myopic, the noisy tactical stuff that needs to get done.
Right. And I think, to me, it's really interesting because especially when you are just starting up, you could look at it in this way, right? So like you have so many square feet, and how much do you want to dedicate to the production versus how much do you want to dedicate to maybe a tasting room? And the more that you dedicate to production, the more there's like that tricky kind of balancing act of, does this actually bring value to the business versus adding tasting room and putting more square footage there can add quite a bit. And so this is kind of where you can step in and say, put all of it towards tasting room. By golly, let me handle the rest, right?
Yeah, I mean, totally. And that's in California, we have well over 200 craft distillers, and they have the ability to do DTC. I'm a type 4, which does not allow me to actually sell bottles directly, which is unfortunate. But, we are in a position where we can focus on bigger macro issues that need to get done, help you with the logistics and help you with the ordering and procurement, like all that sort of stuff that has to happen. But then you don't have to focus on those things so that you can put your attention towards the stuff that drives revenue, that builds brand. And the tasting room is a great example of that too. You should be making money on every square inch of your space. It's just how it should work. And so, we talk about that all the time. We've got over 40 clients today. I think if we check back in a year from now, we might certainly have double that. We're seeing some real interest in what we're doing, and we have a lot of throughput here. So we're excited to be able to offer this to a lot of folks.
Is a lot of businesses that are just starting, or is it people who are scaling back and maybe reformulating their business?
It really is both. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it really is both. I mean, we have clients that are as small as 500 cases all the way up to 100,000 cases a year. And some of those 100,000 cases a year clients may have started at 25 or 50,000 cases, which to a craft distiller is, a number that we would never hit in a million years without help and additional financing, all of the above, or a little bit of luck if we can do it. So we work with those size clients, and then we work with the ones who are much smaller, who might have started at 500 cases and are now up to 3,000 cases and eventually getting to 6,000 cases. And that's a huge win in the world of craft distilling, as far as I think any of us would say. So I think we are trying to figure out what that ecosystem looks like. A lot of people we're talking to are veterans who've been doing this for a long time. and they're like, man, I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm tired. I would love to just like close up shop, figure out what to do. How can we maybe continue the brand, continue a lot of the ethos that we built around that brand, but not have to have a brick and mortar facility any longer? And a good example of that is one of our good clients that a lot of people know about, so we don't, I'm not being shy about it, but Spiritworks is one of the clients that Works Recording Company. They are a brand that I have absolutely respected the heck out of for over a decade. I mean, since Timo and Ashby started, they have been pioneers in the space, both in the crafts, on the contract side, as well as the actual brand side. Mm-hmm. And they're now working with us because they say, listen, their brick and mortar got to be very, very expensive. They had a whole bunch of headwinds against them, but their brand can continue on. And because we are working with them directly, we can continue a lot of the ways that they were going about creating their slow gins and creating their Amaros and creating their gins. And that's the stuff that I think really people want, is they want to have authenticity in their story. And we can keep that authenticity going because we actually work with the entrepreneurs and the distillers themselves to keep that continuity. So that's been really cool.
That is very cool. And I mean, every client has a different want and need, and taking on such a legacy brand like Spiritworks. I mean, I'm sure like for you guys, that felt like maybe not necessarily a challenge, but you were very tactful in how you wanted to achieve their products, right? They have such a great reputation. Carrying that legacy is a huge deal. And it's wonderful to see that it has a home and that it's, still the great quality everyone has come to expect. And we still get to experience the brand.
Totally. And lucky for us, we happen to be, 20 minutes away from where the original distillery was. So there is still a really authentic story that can be told about a Sonoma County based brand that is making, gins and slow gins and has a history there. And yeah, we'll just continue that on. And that's important to that brand. And so as we go to talk with people, we have to build rules around what your brand needs and what is important to that brand. And sort of like, as you build that container, it becomes really, really interesting to learn, what the entrepreneur can bring to the table, but then also what they think they can bring to the market, because that's the biggest question. It's like, why should you exist? What do you have that's different or the same? And why should you exist? And we're constantly trying to help them answer those questions, both in innovation and R&D and product development, but then also in business planning and route to market and that sort of stuff.
How many clients or potential clients have you been approached by where they had this idea where it just was not possible or not a good idea, really?
It's a good question. I love that you laughed first before you asked the question.
We've all had that, been approached by
we've all had
someone
those.
with a great idea.
Yeah. But, for every one of those, there's someone who walks to you and says, I have an idea for a peanut butter flavored whiskey. And you're like, nah, never going to work in a million years. And then
it does. It really does.
And then it does. It really, really does. And that's probably the exception to the rule. But yeah, so we have had people come to us with ideas. And in the world of creating spirits, as I'm sure and many others know, there's an idea and then there's physically how it gets done. So, if they don't come to us with a full gin mash bill or full gin botanical bill, then we have to work with them to build it. If they don't come to us with an idea of how they're going to sell that product at what price point, then we have to start identifying all the gotchas early on that might, and this becomes part of the partnership part of this. We try to do as much as we can to lead a horse to water. Ultimately, though, sometimes people are like, yeah, I want to do it this way. And you say, cool, it's on your dime. Here are the parameters. If our yields are super low on a distillation run or your bottle comes out hazy, that's on you. We've given you our feedback. We've tried to leverage our 14 plus years of experience, plus the other 15 people I have working here who have got a lot of experience in both craft spirits and wine and beer and all other stuff. So if you don't want to listen to us, then that's what happens. And we set parameters around what that looks like. But I've had I think every single one of the outcomes we've had with our products we've bottled have come with some sort of input from our team to help it better, help it make it better, help it make it more presentable, and ideally help it scale too, because you create something once, you want to be able to have some repetition in how it works.
Right. I think that's the most challenging thing that, especially when you get started, you're just some people are so focused on just getting to market that there's also the whole other side, does this scale? How does this scale? Can we find the ingredients? How do we have contracts? All that. And that's where experience really comes in handy.
People make a lot of mistakes with us where if they've had some experience in the industry, they're so used to doing something the exact same way that when you go to try to actually figure out all the gotchas in their bottling or in their production runs, it doesn't usually come out until you actually get in there. And so usually the first one tends to be a little bit of a learning trial by fire, or whatever the analogy you want to use is, learning on the job. But we are definitely feeling like the more and more clients we talk to, they are definitely getting that message down, and we're getting more fine-tuned in how we approach them and try to identify all the stuff up front.
Do you just provide your clients with like a gotcha list? Like, this is all the things you need to be aware of while we get going on this? And it grows every day.
I mean, it usually comes in the form. So we set up, introductory phone calls completely free. They'll let people sort of tell us what they want to do. And we can then, once we've had that information, our business development team does a terrific job of sort of like funneling through the information and saying, okay, cool, who are the different department heads I'm gonna have to work with, make sure we understand the full scope of the project. And then at that time, it's usually when there's a whole bunch of like, okay, you've told us what you want to do. We're going to tell you what we heard. And then it's going to be a bunch of like, okay, here are some questions we have or some concerns we have along the way. And that ends up becoming either really, really good in terms of we create an estimate, they accept the estimate, we can continue on in our business process. Or some ideas, they say, hey, listen, I got to go back to a formulator, or I got to go and talk to my finance team and make sure that we can do what we want to do. And so that's helpful to have. And I have all these people on speed dial. Like, we do a lot of referrals off to other people. So that's been really helpful too.
So Corning and Company, it is, I feel like the name behind that is really interesting. I was reading more about it before we started talking today. Do you want to dive into where this name comes from?
Totally. So my business partner's great grandfather was connected to Corning Company, which was a gigantic distillery and house of brand in Peoria, Illinois, in the early 1900s. And so this facility was like the mecca of production in the early 1900s. At one point, it was one of the largest distilleries in the United States. And they went through some disarray and some bad things happened and a bunch of stuff. So let's put that bad history in the past. But we, in many ways, took that brand name on because that company name on because we really wanted to sort of grow into those shoes a little bit, maybe not as large as they are, but realizing the services that we wanted to offer. And because they were a house of brands, we really thought it would be really great to be able to bring that thing forward and say, okay, what is it that we can do in a modern context to be Corning & Company, the craft distiller incubator of the future. And so we've been building the services on and kind of doing all these things on over the last 3 to 4 years. And now we took the Sonoma Distilling brand, which is really the name of the distillery for so long, and parked that as a brand and not the distillery, and teaching people that the brand is not always the distillery and the distillery is not always the brand is, I think, going to be the lessons of the next couple of years in craft distilling, as a lot of people try to figure out what it is that they're going to do, because we're so used to just sort of sticking that distillery name on the wall and just doing mm-hmm. without a lot of planning. And really, I think what Corning companies of the world, other co-packers exist too, we're just constantly trying to push that innovation, but we're also trying to push the business planning and the bunker strategies and all the things you're going to have to see to the next decade of your career.
Mm-hmm.
So.
One other thing I pulled from this website, and I was just fascinated by it. What is silent distilling?
So it's funny you asked that question, because it's silent distilling is a little bit of, I mean, as far as I understand it to be, silent distilling is essentially, we are not out there ringing the flag saying I make all these products. Like, we want to be in the background.
Mm-hmm. Like
on our bottles that says bottled in Rohnert Park, California. We file whatever company DBA with our basic use permit. We can say we bottle any number of different products at our facility, Spirit Works or Star Trek or whatever else that we're working on today. We put all those on the bottle. But we ultimately don't want to be out there ringing the bell that this is where it was made, unless the client wants that. And mm-hmm. part of us being in service to them, and just letting them come to the front and bring them to bring their story and their brand to the forefront. So I think that's what it's referring to. I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but that's really what we meant by silent distilling. It's sort of an old timey expression of not really ringing the bell about your presence and impact on that product.
It makes a lot of sense. I was secretly hoping it was some kind of vows of silence that distillers took, I was like, what is this? This is amazing. So you can hear, the distiller ears, so you can hear the water as it starts to flow, and you're like, what is that?
Yeah, we're like a cult. Yeah, we all sit here and you don't talk, and you just listen to the still run out.
Right. I'm secretly hoping. Yeah. That's okay.
Well, I respect that. It's cool. And I don't know. I mean, I think the cool part about the craft distilling industry is that it changes itself over and over again. When I first started, there was nobody in here really doing this. And even before me, I mean, the forefathers of craft distilling in Northern California, like St. George and Charbet, Jermaine Rabon, like when I started, there was nobody really here doing this stuff. So, you just sort of, you had to build these lively characters who were these like craft distillers who would show up to trade shows like bow knives and, like have all sorts of weird conversations. And like, ultimately at the end of the day, like I love that there's so much more diversity in craft distilling today than there was historically. I'm excited to see a bunch of new faces and a bunch of new colors of faces doing what we're doing. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see what the next product innovations are that come out. And the cool part is, being on the business development and product development side through Corning, I'm going to be able to have my hand involved in a lot of those too. Mm-hmm. So keeps me agile and trying new things and constantly sort of flexing my creativity. So that's fun.
Yeah, that I mean, I think a lot of distillers in general love to be involved with a variety of projects because you get to really, explore that creative side. Sometimes when you're making like. We've all been in whiskey makers where you're making the same whiskey day in, day out, and that's great. You're making something very consistent. You learn a lot that way too, but having the variability with what you're making every day, I'm sure that is very enjoyable.
It is. I mean, there are days when I miss the constant smell of fermenting mash. I mean, that was such a fun part of my my creative process, which was just like going up to the top of the fermenter and like wafting the smell of fermented to my nose. Like that part was cool, and then it was alive and the bubbling and all the sensory stuff. But yeah, I think there's the innovation side going to be big, and I don't know how a lot of brands just continue to make the same thing over and over again and don't change and don't evolve. And I think the consumer is asking. They're asking, they're begging, they're demanding it. You can use whatever adjective you want. I mean, they are telling us that they need this thing because that's what the buyers out there are buying. So
right. And it's fun to be part of the group of people that are listening and making those changes and being part of the legacy of craft distilling, but also the innovative side too.
Yep, exactly.
What is your favorite project that you've gotten to help develop or develop yourself?
I mean, recently it's a little dorky, so I'll get dorky for a second. But when I was younger, Star Trek: The Next Generation was my favorite thing in the world. I could any given night be seen probably watching an episode of Next Generation, and we got approached to help create and innovate the Star Trek line through the Spirits That Rock people, and I had my opportunity to be able to create some new products for them. I'm in the process of reinventing a couple of things they've already had in market before. And they sort of gave me carte blanche to say, hey, present us with any ideas you've got that we could really tie in. And every time I do, we always have these like geeky conversations where it's like talking about episodes of Star Trek and like why it might pertain to like Trekkies. And well, I've never gone to a Star Trek convention yet. Like I feel like when we finally release some of these products and we can actually go out there and do that, I'm going to be in a really unique place to be among my fellow Trekkies to talk about these things. So that was really fun. And I've been able to create, we have a new espresso martini that's coming out that I helped innovate for them, and it's going to go to bottle and stuff like that. It's just really cool to make stuff that sort of fits their needs, because they've given me this sort of blank canvas to work with a little bit of knowledge behind Trekkie geekiness.
You already knew, so you just get to kind of explore that more.
Totally.
Are these products available at Trekkie conventions?
Yeah, they physically no. You can't sell bottles, as you know. It's crazy sauce with trying to sell bottles across the table. You can buy bottles on their website. They have all of the stuff available. Part of what we also help people set up is the DTC online. So we can overlay on really easily a DTC website that allows them to go and do shipping to 40 to 44 states. So that's been really, really cool. Star Trek does that. And so if you type in Star Trek spirits, you can absolutely buy Romulan rye and Romulan vodka and a whole bunch of new stuff coming soon. So.
Oh man. How was it developing a canned espresso martini? Was it canned?
No, it was actually bottled.
Okay.
So it's technically it's a vodka with natural flavors, with caramel coloring. But yeah, I mean, it was fun. I mean, it's fun because if you work your way back from the shelf and you say, what is it that people are either doing with that product, or they are doing, or they're getting with it, or they're buying it for, you ask a lot of questions. And one of the most popular cocktails in the world right now is espresso martinis. So to make something like that was like, cool, that's a responsive thing, reactive to the market. And they have a consumer base that is interested in innovation. So heck, and they have really cool bottles. I mean, all the bottles are like very authentic to the shows, and like staring at one right now, it's had these beautiful ridges on it, and it's for the collector, it's perfect. And actually the good news is the juice inside also tastes good too. So it's sort of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, everyone go check out Star Trek Spirits. That sounds very fun.
It's cool. And again, like because of the fact that these products are already out in market, there's a ton of stuff we're working on that's sort of behind the scenes and eventually going to come out. But yeah, that stuff is really cool. And we'll just continue to try and innovate and let people dream, and we'll just kind of bring them down to earth when we have to.
I love it. Bring them down to earth. Great way to like slide in a pun. So one of the brands that you manage, or I mean, very, very closely at Corning & Company is Sonoma Distilling Company, correct?
Right. Correct.
That, I mean, it came first, correct?
That's my first baby.
Yeah.
That was really where I got that's the brand that was a distillery. That is still the brand. And, that's been out in market for 14 years, has gone through a couple different iterations on names. At one point it was Sonoma County Distilling, and then I shortened it to Sonoma Distilling Company. It's one of those brands and products that I feel, and this is not being arrogant or cocky, but it's one of those products that I feel like people try, they're like, that's good. Like, I could see how it's usable. It gets sometimes lost in the noise that is the open field. So, we are spending a lot of time constantly reintroducing people to what that product is and how to use it. We've dropped the pricing over the years, so it's at like $40 a bottle. So it's highly, easily usable in cocktails at home. Your hands not shaking when you're pouring it for friends anymore. When I first started, it was $50, $60 a bottle. The age statements have gone from 2 years to 3, 4, and 5 years old. So yeah, that's been a brand I'm very, very proud of, and it continues to just innovate and do different things.
Yeah. So you kind of, I mean, you're part of the movement for California style whiskey. You're in California. You're helping to find that category. What is this California style?
I mean, what I was hoping it would be and what it is, I think are maybe two different things. So California style spirits or California whiskeys really are just sort of made in California. Now, of course, there's different definitions of the word made these days. I'm not here to judge those. Blending in itself is a very tough craft. But, yes, we use grains grown largely from about 100, 150 miles away from the distillery. We support local farmers as much as we can. We mill, mash, and ferment and distill and barrel age on site, using third-degree char barrels and in some cases fours, dry age wood, carrying about 18 to 24 months dry age wood, things that, we all know as distillers would make a really good product, right? I also think the California category, if it was trying to be different, would say, well, you make a California bourbon, maybe your bourbon is drier than the bourbon, and that's what we do. We make really dry bourbon. So like, why don't you make a drier bourbon? We do bone dry fermentations. We ensure that we get full conversions. Like, that's the sort of stuff that we have always done. We did it on a nano scale. Now we kind of do it on a micro scale. And I think that's a category that would be really well received, both from the consumer side, because it's really easy to differentiate. We're not making sweet Kentucky style bourbons. We're making California dry bourbons. Like, that makes sense to me. The problem is California is 35 million people. It's basically its own country. So it's really difficult to kind of get everybody to do the same thing at the same time. But if I was to do something different, I was hoping for something different, that would be my definition of California bourbon.
Well, and just a little segue from that too. Like, your state has 2 different distilling guilds.
Technically, I think it has 5.
5. I know of at least 2.
Yeah.
Like, you guys can't. Yeah, you guys got a lot of people to work with to try to come to terms with what, like, defining a style.
Yeah, it's a big state. We haven't really had laws in our favor since day one, and we haven't had anything galvanizing enough to really move the state to unify under a particular message. There's a lot of infighting and different opinions, and then that being critical, it's just kind of what has happened in the state. When the folks, Chris Steller and Lance Winters and a lot of our good friends got the craft distilling law passed. The Type 74 was created, which is our craft distilling license. That was a big one. It was a big win. Everybody got DTC. Granted, we can only sell 3 bottles per person per day, and we couldn't ship at the time. So we got some victories with a whole bunch of stuff we want to do. But California is also the 5th largest economy in the world, and the string change. And so we just had a hard time trying to unify the state enough to figure out what is the message we want to bring, what are we trying to achieve, and it's just going to continue to be a problem for a while until, unfortunately, enough broken eggs along the way where we're like, listen, we need better access to market, we need better access to innovation. And I've been trying to tell people this all the time. I'm like, even if craft distillers in California can ship to consumers, or they can ship to other states, or they can even do direct distribution, like that's not going to hurt the distribution network. If anything, it might actually free them up from all the craft brands in their book that are just making noise. If they had the ability to go out there and do that, they could innovate. They could talk to people about, hey, I'm seeing a whole bunch of sales from Michigan. Maybe I should go into Michigan and talk to a Michigan distributor at that time and say, cool, I'm seeing a bunch of sales in Michigan from my DTC. I've got 400 people buying a month from Michigan. Let's open up that state for distribution.
Right.
So it's like
proof of concept.
These are exactly right. You need to have numbers drive decisions, and the only way you get numbers is to physically be aware of what's going on by having better control of sales. So I think there's going to be some reckoning happening at some point, because unfortunately what I'm seeing out there is it's a lot of doom and gloom, but in the end it might make our industry in general, not just the state of California or the guilds in California, it might make the entire craft distilling industry a little bit better.
Yeah, and it definitely, there's, California is shadowing or at the forefront, depending on your point of view, of direct to consumer and how that affects all small businesses, all small distilleries. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And, I'm sure you've read the opinion pieces that there's very different, wildly different opinions on whether this should happen or not. Who knows what will happen? Who knows what will happen? And I will say it's amazing. I went to school in Pennsylvania, I went to college in Central PA, and as a place where it was, you had to go to a liquor store to buy your booze. For the state of Pennsylvania to have the best laws for craft distillers is an amazing concept to me. I'm like, how is it possible that state has the best laws for craft distillers? And it's because people like Rob Castle and the guild there have absolutely knocked the cover off, and they've done amazing jobs making their case for why they should exist, which is the same question we ask a brand.
the distillers are answering that question to the legislator, and legislation is they're passing things that gives them, 100 pop-ups a year and direct access to all the liquor stores in the state. It's like, man, they're doing something right there in that state that otherwise I didn't think was rather progressive. So good for them.
Well, and yeah, it's very interesting. Why them, why that, and I mean they're obviously doing a really good job of advocating for themselves. I was just crunching numbers the other day for tourist visits for distilleries around the world, right?
Uh-huh.
And in places that have the best laws for distilleries, like Kentucky, they're getting 1.2 million visitors a year, and I don't think that there's a lot of data out there for, craft distilleries. Obviously, I don't think California is getting 1.2 million visitors a year for the distilleries, but they might be.
Not distilleries. The wineries, we might. I mean, we can live in the shadow of the wine industry and have no problem with that. They themselves are having their own reckoning too. But it's with wine and beer and weed and spirits in California. It's a lively place. So yeah,
sounds fun.
It does sound like fun. Sounds like the best kind of party to go to.
Right. So one of the other really interesting products that you make that I don't think I've had the opportunity to try, but now I've been craving it, is the black truffle rye.
Cool.
I'm very curious on what the research and development was like for this product.
Yeah. So honestly, having conversations with a friend of mine who used to run a bar program up in Healdsburg, which is just north of us. Her name is Pam, and Pam and I were talking one day about how I like to cook with mushrooms and kind of see how it tastes, and it's sort of like the flambe, especially freshly foraged like black trumpets, like see what happens when you get that like liquefaction of this very fragile but beautiful mushroom. And she went to the kitchen and she grabbed a sliver of black truffle because they make amazing food at Madrona Manor in Healdsburg. And she threw it into a bottle of cast strength rye. She's like, let's see what happens. And she came to the distiller a couple weeks later. She's like, holy shit, you got to try this. And I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. And we just scaled it up from, a bottle to a batch. And it started with little 375 bottles, then a bunch more 375 bottles, and then some 750s. And so I started going from buying, 5 pounds of truffles at a time to 10 to 20 to 30. And these are at one point $1,000 a pound. They fluctuate a lot. And we tried it with the Australian truffles and the Italian truffles and the Oregon truffles. And I tried it with all of these different truffles. And I found that the French Perigord was just black to its core, looked delicious, and had so much mouthfeel and flavor to it that we just kept on buying it from the same sources. And so every year we buy a small amount of truffles, and we bring them in, and we now have in 750s versus the 375. And the consumers, it sort of has a little cult following, which has been really great. And I always have to warn people, I'm like, this is not going to be truffle oil or truffle salt, which feels like you just kind of ruin risotto and popcorns, and it just, it's not, you can over truffle something really easily. And it was really funny, as luck would have it, and this is an absolute true story. I was doing a tasting in San Francisco last night at a bar, and one of the guys who was trying the black truffle was talking to me, and we had sit there and talked for about 15, 20 minutes. And after about 15, 20 minutes, he goes, I'm a mycologist. I'm like, you've been sitting there the whole time trying the black truffle, and you're now telling me you're a mycologist? Like, yeah. I'm like, well, what do you think of this? And he was like, listen, you have been able to take through alcohol extraction a whole bunch of flavors that you normally would not be able to get out of this thing. And not only are you getting like damp earth and seaweed and, all that sort of beautiful fungi flavors, but you've gotten umami out of this thing. Like, you have umami, like you should pair this with sushi. And I was like, oh, I've never done that before. That's really cool. And then literally 15, 20 minutes later, I had a sushi chef at the table. I swear this like all happened last night in San Francisco. And I'm literally like, this is great. And I had a sushi chef here. I just talked to my mycologist, told the whole story. He said, I should pair this with sushi. What do you think? He's like, absolutely. Totally down. Great pairing. And so to me, that interaction was really fun. It's sort of how that product got created, but it's also kind of what keeps that product alive for me. We don't sell, thousands of cases of it a year. We make hundreds of cases of it a year. very expensive, hundreds of cases every year. We sell it on the shelf now for like $100 a bottle. At one point, it was like a $3.75 for like $70. So by comparison, it's better pricing. But yeah, it is really unique and fun. It's something that I think pairs really well with blue cheese chopped salads and dry aged steaks and apparently sushi. And I do a lot of whiskey dinners and stuff, and so I've been really excited to always bring that out as a differentiator, as something that tastes really good. Put that into a Manhattan. It stands up on its own 2 feet. It's been really cool. I've been enjoying that part.
What bitters do you do with a Manhattan?
So it's an interesting point, because I actually think if you did too much bitters on there, it would actually overdo it. So I do like half the normal bitter amount when I make my Manhattan with the black truffle, so that some of that truffleness actually still pops out. So a little bit, that's been my go-to. Every once in a while, I'll pull out rather than using a sweet vermouth, I'll do like a Chinar or something like that. Get some artichoke in there, we'll mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, more lean into that umami.
I mean, I've actually poured it on risotto before. I've made, my kids call it cheesy rice, but I've made cheesy rice before and poured some of that on for myself, and I was like, this is pretty good. It's nice and I think the food and the whiskeys part has always been really fun for me. We've done probably over 100 whiskey dinners in 14 years. And those things are just really fun to just be able to collaborate with chefs and talk about different types of pairings. And that's been really cool.
Yeah. I would love if you could, if you can, walk the listeners through like the nose and then the palate of this, because it just sounds so intriguing and I'm trying to picture it.
Yeah. So I use 100% rye whiskey base. So it has, I make a 80% rye, unmalted rye, 20% rye malt mash bill. I pull 4 and 5 year old barrels. I do a very unique blend because unlike my other blends that I want to sort of showcase the spiciness of rye, this one I actually wanted to be a bit more subdued. And then we take the French Perigord truffles, we shave them, and we throw them into the rye whiskey and infuse them for almost a year. So sitting in a tank, we tried doing it in a barrel, and it just diffused all the flavor out. So stainless steel tank. And when you go to try the thing at first, when you put it on your nose, you get a little bit of truffle on the nose. It smells different. It smells very, very earthy, very whereas a lot of that rye spice sort of hits you on your front nose, it actually gets to be very, very sort of like chocolatey and funky and kind of weird fungi on the nose. And when you go to try it, you immediately get that truffle, which is so nice because you paid for it. But then you also get how the flavor affinities of rye, which is anise and black licorice and like a lot of brown sugar and clove and all those those flavor affinities we think of when we think of rye, do so nicely with this living fungus, known as a truffle. And it sort of takes a lot of the burn off of the rye. If it ever did have burn on it, sort of softens it up and makes it much more palatable, makes it kind of buttery, which is really, really nice and sort of different, decadent a little bit. And then, again, the finish on there, super easy going, more rye on the finish than the truffle. The truffle's really up front on the palate. And that's why I think it does well. It's sort of the body of the oiliness of the truffle comes out and through the cocktails if you drink them, and then you still get that sort of sweet finish if you do some sweet vermouth or bitters or whatever the heck else in there. It comes through on the back end. So,
and you mentioned
I hope.
Oh, go ahead.
I hope they paint the nice enough picture. That's kind of what I was going for and where we landed.
I feel it. I feel the picture. And it made me very curious too. You mentioned that you're pulling barrels, dumping them, then infusing, correct?
Correct.
Or have you played around with aging in the barrel?
Yeah, and so it literally like diffused the truffle flavors outside of the barrel. It just like that semi-permeable membrane that is a barrel, it just literally just extracted out of it. And you're like, well, that was nice.
Now the barrel is truffle flavored.
The barrel, exactly. It's a very expensive barrel, but the product is not nearly as truffly as it needs to be. So when we infuse them, we literally put them in like a big old, painter's bag style, and drop it in there, the tea bag to infuse. It's nice.
Oh, wow. That sounds very cool. And something else that you do that's very cool too is you smoke your own barley in house.
Yeah. So we have two products: our California smoked bourbon and our California smoked rye. They've gone by different names like Cherrywood Bourbon and Cherrywood Rye. And they make up sort of like the smoked version of our products. We have a California bourbon, California rye, California smoked bourbon, California smoked rye. So they have this sort of like day and night perspective to them. And we were buying those grains from Breeze for a long time. Sometimes, depending on what availability we have, we still have to buy some just for scale or what have you. But majority of what we do, we have a smoker out back that we built. We had a friend of ours from Petaluma who has now moved to Texas. He's this guy named Al, and Al used to own a company called the Smoked Olive, which makes amazing smoked olive oil, brown sugar, and a couple other things. And I approached him, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and said, "Hey, I'd like to have you smoke some grains for me." And he's like, "Well, why would I do that?" I was like, "Well, because I'll pay you money to smoke grains for me, and then I can use them in my whiskeys." And so it was a little bit of trial and error. I started off with a little smoke shed. It was like 4x4 smoke shed with some trays. And then we eventually scaled it up to a 40-foot shipping container. And so we actually cut it in half right now. So we can actually do about a ton at a time. And that takes about a week. So we lay the grains in there. We flip them every single day. We apply a cold smoke. So the goal is never to get above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And you just get that smoky flavor in there without burning or singeing the grains. Because you don't want to denature the grains. You need to make them usable later on. And so we don't wet the grains. We tried that. We don't need to do that. Just smoking them for a week with good smoke and doing a good job of flipping them every single day does a heck of a job of getting you the flavor that you want.
So
and then you incorporate that in the mash bill. You take your corn, you take your rye, and then you take your malted barley that's been smoked, you incorporate it into your mash bill, and then you've got a smoky whiskey.
And this is a little dark, but that also seems like a very California style, a little smoky, a little smoky whiskey. Yeah.
It can be. I mean, I could see how smoked flavor in barbecue and bourbon just have a natural affinity. They're not, the flavors just play really well together. So it wasn't hard to think about how they could be done. And because there was a commercially available smoked grain out there to try to start, we were able to sort of prove concept. And our California smoked bourbon is probably one of our best sellers. We sell out of it pretty quickly. So it ends up being quite good. And with a good cigar, I always tell people I like more gamier meats like boar and venison. It does really, really well because it plays nicely into that more gamier meats. Yeah, a good Chopino does really well. We're in the Bay Area. We do a lot of some of the Italian heritage we have out here. We do a lot of Chopino, which is a seafood and tomato base. And the acidity of the tomato does really well with that cherrywood smoke. So I'm constantly pushing you should try these things. Like, drink it while you're cooking, drink it while you're eating. Like, let's try these things out and see how they kind of work for you.
Right. Do you guys have a smoked single malt in the works? Fingers crossed.
Good question. No, it's a good question. So I've actually still never released my single malt. We've been a member of the Single Malt Commission for a long time. I've got some barrels that are 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm probably going to blend in some younger stuff as it comes of age to around 4. So we have never released our single malt. We plan to release it at some point. I use a 3,000 gallon Scottish pot still. So, I mean, I can make really good single malt here, and we do for some of our clients as well. But yeah, do we have a smoked one? No, not yet. It's been open for discussion. I've had some different smoked woods that I want to play with before I actually do one like that. But let's stay tuned. We've only been in business for 14 years, so who knows what the next 14 years will bring.
Keep the innovation going, right?
That's it. I mean, it does keep us excited, and it also allows the consumer who's been following our journey for a while. There are people both in the state of California as other parts of the country who have been drinking our stuff. Obviously, thank you, but they also have kept our innovation going and given us good ideas and feedback, and that's been really important as part of this edification in distilling.
I think an overall theme for this conversation is innovation, but another side to it as well. It's been coming up quite a bit is food pairings with spirits, and sometimes it feels like that is just something people don't try, right? They are very familiar with wine and food pairings. They don't think about spirits and what that can do as well. But you bring it up quite a bit, and it seems like something that's very intentional. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think if you put whiskey in particular, let's just talk about whiskey for a second. But if you put spirits in general, but whiskey in particular, in a box, and it's before a meal or after a meal, and that you're not talking about what to do with it while you eat. You eat 3 times a day at least, sometimes less or more depending on what kind of day you're having. So if you're not figuring out how to incorporate it into your food culture, then you're going to be missing out on not just a huge part of the demographic, but you're also missing out on a lot of sensory evaluations and excitement that you can bring. And there are, as I keep on bringing up, I look at the Food Bible. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of that before, but it's the book that essentially you can go to any sort of flavor affinity in there, and it'll tell you, I'm tasting anise, and here are all the things that go really well with anise. So it allows you to build really nice pairings and foods and ways of working together. And it's very Californian of us, like, so call me a hippie from California, but like we really enjoy doing food pairings with our wines and our beers. And so I've been just trying to ring the bell about whiskeys, because I just think it's an underutilized part of our business. And people are like, yeah, I'll just have my cocktail before a meal, and then I'll have wine during my meal, and then I'll have a brandy afterwards. It's like, well, you're missing out on something in between, perhaps. You gotta find the right thing to pair. You gotta find the right thing to pair with it.
Oh yeah, we did a dinner with gin flight pairing. So every course had a gin flight, and I think one of the main course was salmon that had been brined with juniper.
Fun.
I know, and then you're like, oh, obviously this makes sense, and it worked really well together. Those flavors work well together, and then having it with, like, I think it was a sour style cocktail, like that's
wow,
like that sounds amazing. Why? Let's explore this more. There's a lot of room for that.
Love that. I had a whiskey dinner in London. We've been for sale in the UK and France for 10 years now, actually 12 years now, and the chef prepared, like, for one of the courses, like, he had his amazing meats and all sorts of stuff, but like my favorite thing he did was this celeriac that was smoked with hay that he paired with my bourbon.
Wow.
My smoked bourbon. And I was like, boom.
Yeah.
That was freaking cool. And it's moments like that where, like, first of all, never would have thought of that in a million years, but then it's just the way that you prepared it, and you don't normally get a chance to, not everybody eats that root. So it was really cool to see people's eyes light up during dinner, being like, that was one of the coolest things I've seen. Or, at a whiskey dinner once, I was, talking with some of the people there, and maybe had a couple of whiskeys in my system. And I took my rye whiskey, and I took some fresh butter on the table and started whipping them together. And then people from all over the table were taking, like, fresh bread and dipping it in the butter, and being like, oh my God, that's so good. I'm like, yeah, fat and alcohol and a little salt, and you're doing all right.
Right.
You've got all these components you need to make a good meal. And again, all the herbaceousness of rye just played really nicely. So yeah, push the envelope. It's fun. Like, if people are gonna be drinking less and they're gonna be drinking higher quality stuff, and you might as well enjoy it spread out over the course of the night in different types of ways, and without completely, putting it on the shelf and saying, I'll see you later in the night after I've had my meal.
Right. So. I think it's fun to talk about those moments where you just get really, like, smacked with inspiration. Is it stuff like that really inspires you? Or do you have, like, these small moments where you're just like, all of a sudden this great idea came to me? I like to call them fun intrusive thoughts, where you just kind of can't turn your brain off, and you just never know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really dig those. I think those times, moments like last night, talking to that mycologist and a sushi chef in one night, that gets me going, right?
Mhm.
I ate a lot of sushi, so that's either a good thing or a bad thing for my health. But it is those moments of inspiration that ultimately do keep the excitement alive. We used to make a poutine back in my early days when we first started, and to do that, we used to juice potatoes. I would literally take Yukon Golds grown in Stockton, California, and we would juice them one at a time in like a Jack Lane style juicer. And we'd juice and juice and juice and juice. And we would start earlier and earlier in the night because it took longer and longer. Our batch size got bigger and bigger. And at one point we were tired of taking the little buckets out because it was too much work to take the bucket out afterwards to dump it out. So we put the juicers on the back of a pickup truck, and I had these smocks with like trash bag smocks on me. And then we just had the potato soot just shoot all over us as we were going. And then eventually one juicer would die. So we got another one. So we would just wait an hour for it to like cool down so we can make more. I'm telling you the story with a long way of telling you the story that like we started this juicing run one night at like midnight with the intention of being done by like 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And it was like 4:00 in the morning and I'm covered in like dried potato soot. And I'm looking at the full moon one night and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is why I want to be a distiller.
Mhm.
Like, I totally dig this. Like, this moment can sustain me probably for another 20, 30 years. Just thinking up, looking up, the smell of like pink colored potato aside. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff that I think does. You have those moments as a craft distiller, you have those moments as an entrepreneur. And I think it does help sustain you for whatever elongated period of time you need to keep on going.
Oh yeah, because sometimes the road gets rough, but there are those moments where you just feel alive.
Yes, it is true, and it is very, very true. Very true.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for being with us today on the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. I really appreciate it. I think our listeners are going to really appreciate this episode. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, follow us at Sonoma Whiskey for the Sonoma distilling stuff and pouring company. And if anybody wants to have a chat, we are open to learning more about their businesses and look forward to hearing more about the innovations out there.
Yes, of course. Anytime. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
For more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. Whether establishing a new distillery or expanding into a brewstillery, ABS Commercial is your full-service equipment manufacturer for equipment ranging from 50 liters to 5,000 liters. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring new stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.